Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are joined by Dani Zoldan. He is the head of Stand Up New York. That is a really big comedy club in New York City, Upper West Side of Manhattan. And we're talking about what it's like to own a stand-up club during the pandemic and what he has done to bring comedy all over the five boroughs and even to Miami and hopefully nationwide. So we're talking about how his journey with the club and talking a little bit about comedy and the business of comedy and the magic of live shows. I do want to note we had some technical issues with this interview, so it's a little bit shorter than my interviews ordinarily are. The audio quality seems fine, but if it seems a little cut together or like we're jumping around a lot, that would be because of the technical issues. But I think we're going to learn a lot together. He's a fascinating person. And so let's jump into the interview. Let's go. It's the Cameron Journal podcast. This is the Cameron Journal podcast. It's a place where we talk about important things. It's a place where we bring a little slice of the news to you. And it's a place where we do important things, have important conversations. It's also things that I like to talk about. My name is Cameron Cowan, and this is the Cameron Journal podcast. Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we're joined by Dani Zoldan. He is founder of Stand Up New York, and he also does funny videos for brands. And we're going to talk a little bit about comedy and stand-up and what it takes to make corporate branding funny. So welcome, Dani, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I want to start, why don't you fill in the listener on what your background is, how you got into the comedy business, and what Stand Up New York is.
Okay, so I'm 39 years old. I'm about to be 40 next Wednesday, which I'm very unhappy about. Because I feel very young. You know, I'm surrounded by a lot of young people, whether it's employees or comics. So I guess it could be worse. But I got into the comedy business when I was 27 years old. I bought Stand Up New York, which is on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, with my best friend, Gabe Waldman. And the reason we bought it is because I used to come here and I used to go to other comedy clubs when I was in high school and college to see Gabe perform. He was an amateur comic. And are you familiar with bringer shows?
Yes.
Okay, so Gabe was, for your audience that isn't familiar with bringer shows, it's when you're a new comic and a way to get on stage is if you bring all your friends and they spend money and buy drinks. So typically bringer comics need to bring like 8 to 10 people, which is crazy. So I was one of those suckers that spent all of my money in high school and college going to bringer shows and spent all my money watching Gabe perform. So when I heard this club was for sale back in end of 2008, I called Gabe and I'm like, dude, like we used to go to Stand Up New York when we were in high school. Let's try to buy the club. And the rest is history. We've been here for 12 years. And I had previously been in the telecom industry. So I started a telecom company when I was 24. And I sold that about 5 years ago. So the first 7 or 8 years of running Stand Up New York, I was also running my telecom business, which was very difficult. And then I ended up selling my telecom business 4 or 5 years ago, and I jumped all into the comedy industry.
Fascinating journey. End of 2008, though. What a terrible time to be buying a business.
Well, when you're 27 years old, you don't really know what you're doing. So,
well, I mean, how was it during those early days of the recession? I
feel like comedy is recession proof. I thought it was like everything proof, but apparently not during a pandemic. But even during a recession, people need to laugh more than ever, right?
Right.
I didn't really think about it. Our focus was just learning the business and putting up the best comics and putting butts in seats, no matter how the economy was going.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, speaking of that, how has COVID-19 been for?
Amazing. People think my brother makes fun of me. He thinks that I created the virus because it's been really good for us. And the second strand I created also. But
wow,
no, it's been
now
good.
We know who's responsible.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of listeners? Am I going to get a lot of feedback now? Your mom's going to email me.
Hopefully not. My mother's from West Texas. You would not want an email.
Your grandma that maybe died of COVID? Will she be mad at me?
Oh no! We'll just redirect all the hate mail to President Xi in China.
Yeah. So where was I? Oh no! So it's been actually good for us. I sort of found my my creative. I sort of found my voice during the pandemic. The club, the 12 years that we ran the club, it was hard to set ourselves apart from the other comedy clubs. A lot of the comedy clubs book the same talent and we're going after the same audience, and they all charge a cover and a 2-drink minimum. So it's really difficult to set yourself apart. But when COVID hit, I saw that as an opportunity to do something different, and we accomplished that. Back in the spring, we started outdoor shows in Central Park, and the first show was a big hit. 50 people came out with 6 comics. We paid them, and instantly I knew we had something awesome. The comics, they were all thanking us, for giving them a platform, well, the grass to perform on, not even a stage. And the audience, they haven't been out in months, so they were very appreciative, to be out there laughing. So I knew we had something special, and right away I called John, my booker, and I'm like, dude, we gotta scale this big, and let's try to do 50 shows a week. And everyone thought I was crazy, but we accomplished it. We had 2 spots in Central Park. We were in Battery Park. We were in Prospect Park, McCarran Park, Astoria Park. So we were in a bunch of parks in Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn. And I mean, we paid out thousands of spots to comics. Our ticket sales tripled during COVID. We were doing 14 shows before COVID. We were doing 50 during. So we doubled our Instagram following. We built our email list. And it's allowed me to be creative and innovative. And I think that's where I thrive, being against the wall and just trying to figure out how to survive. And besides doing shows in the parks, we did a show in a church because churches are open. We do shows in the subway. We take over the last subway car, and we do that every Saturday night. We've been doing rooftop shows. So it's been really cool.
I think it's impressive that you managed to take your club, which is in Upper West Side of Manhattan, and then kind of take it out into the rest of the city. So maybe gotten to people that wouldn't ordinarily make the trek into town to see you.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you've come to them.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something that will continue after COVID. We'll always be on the lookout of just great pop-ups. Even outside of New York, we did a pop-up in Miami last week. During COVID, we did shows in LA for a few weeks. We have Connecticut shows coming up. So, I really see stand-up New York across the country. Obviously in places where there are a lot of comics, because that's critical. We're not going to go to, a small town, and do a pop-up show. So it's got to be an area where there's a lot of comics, like LA, New York, Austin, Florida, Chicago, maybe Seattle.
Yeah, well, if you're ever in the Emerald City, let me know.
Yeah.
It's absolutely. So now, when it comes to who you book and what do you find funny, what do you look for in comedy? Because comedy's kind of had this explosion over the last couple years. Like stand-up comedy is kind of had and is having a moment. What do you look for in your comics?
I mean, honestly, I'm not the booker, and I'm pretty hands off. When it comes to the booking, I have a really good booker, Dan Romeo, and I trust him. But I mean, if I had to answer that question, I would say the comics that are always, just creating new material. There are some comics that I see them now, and I saw them 20 years ago when I went to the Comedy Cellar when I was in high school, and they have the same material. So I mean that's what I try to stay away from. So we try to book comics that are always just coming up with new material and tweaking it and making it better, obviously. And it doesn't matter if they're young, old, male, female. Just constantly finding new material.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I used to interview this guy named Steve Bluestein, and he was in Vegas for 25 years, and he did not change his material for 25 years because it was all timed and regulated with the show sort of thing.
Yeah.
I could not do that. I don't know how people do that. I would get bored after about 6 months.
Yeah, but there are a lot of comics that do that. But we prefer comics that are constantly experimenting. I would say that.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. So now when it comes to like business clients, corporate brands who are trying to leverage comedy and somehow both be funny and sell their product, how does that creative process happen?
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, we created a company called Skittish Media, and we create funny content for brands and ad agencies. So, I mean, these days, most brands are advertising on Facebook and Instagram, and in order, to be seen, besides putting ad spend behind your ad, you need to have thumb-stopping content. So you need to have content, video, ideally, where people will want to stop and watch. So, I mean, and also comedy is I believe, the most watched video content on the internet. So, taking that knowledge, knowing that comedy is the most watched content on the internet and utilizing our comics, we thought it would be a great way to offer a service to brands and help them put out that funny content on Facebook and Instagram and drive sales to their product.
So my next question is, what does it take to make comedy work in advertising for a brand? Because a lot of brands will try to do something funny and it doesn't work and it's very cringeworthy. But then some things work spectacularly well. What does it take to make a brand funny?
I mean, I think there are a lot of different variables. I think the talent is number one, and the creative. So I wouldn't leave it up to the brand to come up with funny and engaging content on their own. They really need to bring on experts, writers, comedians, even like a writer's room to come in and understand the product and believe in it as well. And then the ideas will come up. Our process is when a brand wants to hire us, we hear about the product, we learn about it. We don't really throw out ideas, like video ideas like that meeting, because obviously we need to sit on it. We'll ask the brand to send us their product so we can see it and touch it or taste it if it's food. And then after sitting on it for a few days, we'll come up with a short list of comics that we want to bring in and that we think would like this product, and we'll build a short list of comics that we would suggest to the brand, like, hey, we got these 5 comedians that we think would be great to write a funny video about your product, and we'll run it by them for approval, and then we'll get the comics in a room together and just brainstorm different ideas, which we'll propose to the brand. But I think original, obviously, you need authentic. I would lean on like the short side. So Facebook and Instagram, there's so much. There's just like so much content out there and noise, and you really need something fun and different and short that'll get people to stop their thumbs on their smartphone and watch that funny video.
Yeah, so I was asking about, like, with like Super Bowl ads, there's always the hype around them, and the ones that seem to be the most memorable are the ones where you forget that there's you forget that it's advertising because it tells a story and it's super funny, and it's very memorable, and that's kind of what makes advertising.
And I'm surprised more brands haven't adopted that strategy.
Yeah.
Most of the commercials out there are terrible, and these are brands that have a lot of money. Like, how come they're not hiring more creative people to come up with better commercials? That's something I never understood.
Yeah, it's an odd sort of thing, especially there's a ton of really, great talent that would be happy to do it, easy to get sort of thing, but that are incredibly funny. Yeah. Speaking of that, we talked a little bit before about there kind of being a whole kind of comedy renaissance going on right now. What do you think about comedians and podcasts? Because that has become a pretty huge outlet for comedy over the last couple
Just what are my general thoughts
about all that?
Comedians doing podcasts?
Yeah, like there's kind of an explosion of funny people and comedians doing their own podcasts.
I think it's a great medium for many ways. I wouldn't tell a comic to go into podcasting to try and make money, because it's very difficult to make money in the podcasting space. But I would advise them to have a podcast, just to talk about a subject that's interesting about them. And it's an amazing way to network with other comedians and even non-comedians. If you have a podcast and your branding is good, your artwork is good, you've got a clear, way that tells people what the podcast is about. And obviously, if you're on all of the audio platforms, you can really leverage that to network and reach out to comics at any level and have a chat with them, whether it's virtual or in person. For myself, podcasting has been very beneficial. Anyone that I want to meet, whether it's a comic or a business person or an actor or a musician, I've reached out to a lot of these people. I emailed Mark Cuban a few months ago asking him to be on a podcast, and he responded right away. So I think it's a great way. It's a great way to network and meet people. And even though it might not make money right away, or you might not make money directly from podcasting, there are ways to make money down the line based on that podcast that you had. It's a relationship that you're building.
The last kind of question I wanted to ask was, when it comes to the kind of the difference between podcasting and the old way of releasing albums and then just touring comedy clubs, do you think our kind of weird new digital world, how is that going to change live in-person comedy? Because now we have podcasts, we have audiobooks, all this sort of thing. Does that do anything different for live in-person comedy?
I mean, I think everyone still will need like in-person human interaction. It's never going away. Like, I mean, it'll be really sad if it does. I really, it's not going to. I mean, so I think the live experience is very special. And when COVID passes, you know, we're looking forward to like opening up, and I would love things to open up, comedy clubs, music venues, Broadway. I would love it to open up, like, and be as, you know, big as it was before. So that's never going to go away. But at the same time, yeah, there is so much more digital content out there that entertains you in a good way and a bad way. You know, you can spend like hours on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or Netflix or Hulu or Amazon, right?
Of course.
There's only going to be more, but I mean, and that's great, you know, that there's a lot of quality content out there. But at the same time, you know, people are living in their own worlds, and they're not as engaged in person as much as they were before. You know, which is also unfortunate. Even when you're on the subway, like, it's rare where someone's just like sitting there and just like looking around or closing their eyes and resting. Like, people are on their smartphones. People are at home, instead of being with their family, they're on their phones or watching Netflix. You know, and me, like, instead of talking to my wife or, you know, at dinner, I'm on my phone. So, I mean, I think that's like the negative effects of what's going on, and I don't know. I don't think there's like a solution to that. Like, if anything, it's going to get worse, right?
Yeah, definitely. But I think that's what makes the live environment special, is because you get to be in a space together with people experiencing something with someone. And yeah,
I mean, a solution is, you know, everybody should convert to Judaism and keep the Sabbath every Saturday, where they don't touch their phones. I mean, I do that.
Well, yeah, that certainly would be a national policy. That'd be good. That'd be good. So we've come to that part of the show where we do plugs. So why don't you let us know where we can find you online and learn more about Stand Up New York?
Sure. I mean, our website, standupny.com, that's a great place to start, just to see about upcoming shows that we have. Instagram at standupny, we're pretty active. Not just promoting shows, but we're always just like posting funny shit. So that's a fun account to follow. Twitter at standupny. We're on Facebook. And I mean, we're looking forward to reopening soon and having live shows.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Cameron, appreciate you having me on.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter. And we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.